2018 edition, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm going to ask Commissioner Olivas to lead us this evening.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Michelle, can I have a roll call, please?
Mark Johnson.
Here.
Britton Griffith. Present. Ed Hawkins.
Here.
Paul Olivas.
Here.
John Marshall. Here. Kevin Weisky is absent. Peter Gower.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Move on to item number 3, which is public comment. This item is for either public comment on any action item or for any general public comment. Just a reminder, if you do have a comment this evening in one of our public comment items, to please fill out one of these request to speak forms. They're over with Michelle there. Danny's filling one out right now. Right, Danny? Oh, yeah. Okay. And a reminder, you have 3 minutes. There's a little chime when you get to that 30-second point. State your name when you get to the microphone. And our first one this evening is Tom Northrup, please, followed by Tammy Holt Still.
How we start this timer, dude?
Michelle
I
starts
need you
it
to
for
speak into the microphone, though,
Just
okay?
make sure you
Thank
talk into the microphone
And it's
there.
going to start
Okay.
now.
I'll do this, guys. Anyway, with this proposed warehouse, what are we doing with the water drainage?
So I can't answer you on the record, but we can make note of your questions and respond to you during
Okay.
that item. So you can
Okay.
ask us questions, we'll mark them down, we'll get back to you.
Okay.
This is your
Also,
time.
Swan Lake, any news on that? What we're going to do with that drainage issues? Same thing?
Yep,
Okay. End of my questions.
okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Tammy, hold still.
Tammy Holt Still, Lemon Valley Swan Lake Recovery Committee. The water's still there. We're still here for the record. Last night was a very interesting eye-opener. Thank you for your questions and how that went. It was kind of interesting. Was different. I was sad to see some of the others voted the way they voted, but that's par for the course. Again, the water's still there. Like the gentleman said, it hasn't gone anywhere. You guys are still putting effluent into it. You want to add development, which is more stormwater runoff, more effluent, and you have a lake that's overflowing. The only reason that it's not damaging most of the residents is because of HESCO barriers. Do you realize those HESCO barriers are going to be starting on their second year in March? They're failing, they're getting old, they're getting weak, they're being beat up, they've been hit by vehicles. They're not going to last. They will fall apart and the water will be back. The pumps this last winter or this last storm had problems. Whether the company didn't prepare, whatever. Lemon Drive residents had water in their front yards about ready to hit their homes. Pompey had water on the other side of the HESCO barrier that took another pump to pump out. And also the pumps along Lemon Drive that were just put in, there was water all the way up to the halfway mark from the HESCO barriers because the pumps weren't turned on and they weren't being pumped. So there was water all over the road, standing water on the road. It's a danger. That whole area is a danger. And it's affluent water. They say it's recreational, but how would you like your grandkids or your kids to be playing in that water when just down the street on Lear Boulevard it says hazard, do not touch, avoid contact? Come on. It doesn't change in 100 yards to good water all of a sudden. So the city of Reno needs to stop pumping affluent water. City of Reno needs to know exactly how much stormwater runoff they are running into Swan Lake. Swan Lake needs a fix. And it's time for the city of Reno, Washoe County, and whoever else to work together to get something done. The residents need it. It's been long enough. There is no permanent mitigation plan yet, and it's time for action. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other requests to speak on this item, general public comment, item 3? Okay, seeing none.
I have a comment.
Okay, please. And when you're done, please fill out one of these forms.
I have, it must not have made its way to you yet.
Are you Craig?
Yes, I am.
Okay, Craig, you indicated a specific case number, which we haven't gotten to yet. You can make your comment now under general public comment, or when we get to that case number, you can
Okay,
make
so we're going
comments
to
on that
have
item.
comment on this specific case later.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we'll hang on to that. So general public comment. Okay, going to go ahead and close that then and move on to item 4, which is approval of the minutes. First up, April 26th, from our joint planning commission, looking for a motion.
Commissioner Johnson, move to approve.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hawkins, second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. Motion carries. We'll move on to item 4.2, minutes from our regular meeting from May 3rd. Looking for a motion if there are no changes.
So moved.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Marshall. Do I have a second?
Commissioner Johnson, second.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And Commissioner, okay, thank you. Commissioner Olivas.
Commissioner Olivas abstain.
Commissioner Gower, I abstain as well. I was not there. Moving on to item number 5, City Council Liaison Reports.
I do not have anything from Councilwoman Breckus.
Okay, thank you. So we will move on then to item 6.1 under our unfinished business public hearing category. This is case number LDC 18-00015 Silver Dollar Estates. And Commissioner Johnson, you're
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. My employer has ongoing business with the Washington County School District, who is a party to this particular case. So on advice of council, I will be recusing myself from this item.
Thank you. Why? No, nobody told me that. So we're going to move on and begin with a presentation from staff's, excuse me, not staff, the applicant's representative. And then we'll get to staff.
Good evening. For the record, Stacy Huggins with Wood Rogers representing the applicant. I am going to do just a quick overview of this project because it's been a couple months since we were here before. I know you've all heard this project a couple of times, but I'll just give a little refresher. You can see on the exhibit on the overhead, this property is split zoned, SF6 on the northern portion and community commercial on the southern portion. The single family detached is permitted in single family 6,000, the yellow portion. Cluster development is also allowed with an SUP in that portion, and single family attached is allowed within that portion. Within the community commercial portion, that's the red area, single family attached is allowed with a site plan review. The project has been clustered to preserve the drainage ways and the open space, and there's a 100-foot buffer along the highway. This really is a great infill opportunity, and the project works within the existing zoning boundaries. The request before you, again, as a reminder, is a 619 single-family unit tentative map and special use permits. It's a mix of detached and attached products with 25 acres of open space and common area. There are 3 distinct neighborhoods associated with this project. The areas in the northern portion, I'll refer to as areas 1 and 2, are single-family detached. Area 3, which is in the south eastern corner of this property, is single-family attached duplexes. And Area 4, which is in the southwest portion, is single-family attached triplex products. Also want to point out that as a part of this project, there is an 8-acre elementary school site up in the single-family detached area. I also want to point out that these lots, we are anticipating starting at about $260,000 with an average price of $315,000. A lot of that will be dependent on market price at the time of construction, but right now we're anticipating that price point. Looking at one of the major issues was stormwater mitigation. You all saw this exhibit at the last meeting I was at. This exhibit on the right shows the basins, the hydrology basins associated with this site and the drainage associated with those basins. The project includes 4 on-site basins designed to mitigate increased storm runoff, that's retention, as well as increased stormwater volume, detention, due to the development. We have to, for the 100-year 24-hour storm post-development, storm runoff peak flows have to match pre-development peak flows. So what this exhibit on the right shows is the difference. The pre-development storm runoff peak flow is 510.9 CFS. As a result of the 4 detention basins, detention, retention, I apologize, they serve both purposes. These 4 green dots that you see on here, as a result of those 4 green dots, as well as the LID strategies provided throughout this project, we were able to reduce the storm runoff peak flow by 0.4 cubic feet per second. That's the flow going to Swan Lake. Just to give a little pictorial of how those basins work. Again, they are detention and retention basins. They're designed to serve both purposes. They will retain for the 100-year 10-day storm. They will detain for the 100-year 24-hour storm. They will be maintained by the HOA. That's a part of this overall project. And there will be an adopted O&M manual that will be on record with the City of Reno. The combination of the drainage ways, the detention basins, and the LID strategies further assure that post-development drainage is the same, or better in this case, than pre-development drainage. Sewer, we've had quite a bit of conversation about the sewer associated with this project. As I've said before, we will connect into existing sewer main running north in Vista Parkway to the Reno Stud Treatment Plant. We've had several conversations with Public Works staff, and they have indicated that adequate capacity exists currently for this project. There are conditions in the staff report that further ensure that capacity exists before a final map can be recorded. And the developer understands that there's limited capacity at the plant and that the city only reserves sewer capacity with the approval of a final map on a first come, first served basis. So they understand there is some risk in this project getting approved, and there may not be an ability to develop it when the time comes forward. I do want to note that this project could or will generate approximately $3.9 million in sewer impact fees that can and should be used for the plant expansion as it moves forward. Traffic and access we've talked about. Again, this project is anticipated to generate approximately 4,494 average daily trips. We did receive comments from RTC back when we first started this project, and all of those suggestions or conditions were incorporated into the design of this project. The exhibit on the screen depicts the improvements specifically on Vista Parkway. So those improvements include an extension of the northbound left turn pocket. That's this way. I guess that's westbound, sorry. And then an added southbound right turn deceleration lane, as well as turn lanes coming off of Trading Post, and conduit for a signal in the future at this intersection. In addition to the traffic impacts associated directly with this project, we did a freeway traffic capacity analysis to understand the impacts on I-80 and 395. The information provided from that identified 395 north of I-80 at a level of service C or D, depending on where the segment was. Discussions with NDOT suggested that a level of service D is an acceptable level of service for this roadway, and they were not concerned about that. So based on their discussions with them. 395 will continue to operate at what NDOT believes is an acceptable level, even with the build-out of Silver Dollar. In closing, I think I've said this a couple times, the developer really did try to bring forward a project that was sensitive to the area, met the needs for attainable housing in this area, and worked within the zoning that's on these pieces of property. We have read the staff report and agree with all the conditions. Our team is here. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer them. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Jeff for a presentation from staff.
Thank you very much, Chair Gower and members of the Planning Commission. Jeff Borkhardt, Associate Planner for the record. Rather than going into detail of the proposed project, which Stacy covered well, I wanted to go over a history of where we started, where we're at today, to context everything before we enter into questions. So initial hearing was November of 2017, and the Planning Commission initially continued this project in order to allow the applicant more time to address concerns with flooding and effluent discharge into Swan Lake. And that was at the applicant's request. And then in December of 2017, the applicant presented the update on sewer capacity, effluent discharge, and traffic. And the Planning Commission requested a continuance so they could take a look at a global conversation about what's happening in the North Valleys, and requested a presentation from the Public Works Director, Mr. Flansburgh. And in February of 2018, the Public Works Director provided a presentation on flooding, effluent discharge into Swan Lake, and included the standards that we use in order to determine that development will not cause issues with flooding. And then in March of 2018, following the February meeting, staff received updated calculations on sewer capacity, but we needed some more time in order to analyze project phasing, phasing of the proposed plant expansion, and then in April of 2018, we didn't have all those numbers yet, so we asked for a continuance. And then May of 2018, the Public Works Director presented all those findings with regards to plant capacity at the Reno Treatment Facility, and basically said that there is sufficient sewer capacity currently at the Reno plant, and that timing of development related to capacity would be closely monitored with procedures that would go into place if we got close to the limit. And he also mentioned that it was crucial for development to continue to provide revenue necessary to do the plant expansion and pay for those public improvements. At this point, the Planning Commission has seen the project a number of times. It does meet all of our code requirements, and the remaining issues that the Planning Commission was concerned about was mainly regarding sewer capacity, effluent, and flood management within Swan Lake. And so the applicant has shown that the post-construction flows will actually be less than the pre-construction conditions, and the Public Works Director has indicated that there is capacity at the Reno Treatment Facility. So with the additions of conditions 50 through 53, staff can recommend approval. Our engineering staff is here tonight. The applicant's representatives in attendance, their traffic engineers here, their engineers are here, and there's a number of people here to answer any questions should you have any. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff. So this is a public hearing item. I do have one request to speak form. Before I get to those, I'm going to ask the commissioners for any disclosures on this item, and I'll start with Commissioner Hawkins.
Commissioner Hawkins spoke to the applicant's representative, and I drive by the site almost every day.
Commissioner Griffith, no new disclosures.
Commissioner Gower, I spoke with the applicant's representative briefly and previously visited the site.
Commissioner Marshall, no disclosures.
Commissioner Levis, no new disclosures since prior meetings.
Okay, thank you. I am at this point going to open up the public hearing portion of the item and ask Danny Cleus to come up.
Danny Cleus for the record. There's sites up there right now that aren't being worked. Is this going to be another mud hole because they can't hook up to the sewer? Why aren't the other ones going? Gave them clearance to start work. Now they're all on hold. City of Reno has a sewer problem. It's just not in the North Valleys either. Look what's happened to Park Lane Mall, or what used to be Park Lane Mall. It's been sitting too. This project shouldn't go through because there's a lot of what ifs. Retention detention ponds. That is all done off of a model. There has to be a real survey, real engineer report done up there. Nobody knows anything. It's just a model. It's a guessing game. Anybody can guess those numbers. And if you look, it's all about flow. Well, you need volume too. Yeah, it might take a couple more days, but it's all going to end up in that lake. Eventually in my yard. Nevada, you're not supposed to hurt the people downstream. Well, it's already happening, and now it's going to continue. It is a good plan. Maybe you guys should have thought about putting the other ones on hold so you can put this one in. What about the police? What about fire? You got another elementary school. Stead Elementary is only probably 1/8 of a mile away from this one. Come on. You need better planning than this. It's getting old, guys. I don't like coming here. I'm sure you guys are tired of hearing about it. But the North Valleys are not made to do what you guys are doing to it. All the planners in Washoe County, City of Reno, and even Sparks, I bet you none of them have worked around closed basins. There's only so much you can put into one of them. Yet, everybody wants to cram more and more into them. There's no infrastructure out there for this. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to make a comment on this item? That was the only request to speak form I had. Okay, seeing none, I will close public comment and bring it back.
I didn't turn it in. Can I still?
Yep.
Okay.
Make your comment and then please fill one of these out afterwards. And state your name when you get up there, please.
Yeah, I'm Ron De Silva, resident off of Military. And I guess the same thing. I mean, looking at most of these projects, I see the expected projected outflows and the rest. For instance, now I've heard from the Planning Commission that supposedly the Stead Sewer Treatment Plant is sufficient or will have sufficient capacity in track with the new building as it's going. But as Danny said, the same problem is the sewage treatment plant may be able to handle it, but there's still more effluent. After it gets treated, where does it go? Back down to Swan Lake again. So we're still just putting, if we look at everything in isolated little parts, this subdivision itself seems very well planned. It should work just fine. But I don't think, and it's the same thing. I mean, if we just look, if I draw 80 acres, and I know right now it's just brush, it's got a percolation rate of so much. And yes, the stormwater, groundwater will handle it. But we're now, when we put the housing in there, we're adding extra water brought in from TWMA, household water, and that also has to get treated and handled one way or the other, either as stormwater from the runoff from the streets or sewage. So I think that's the other thing that's, in the traffic studies, I think the ones at least I've seen on the next project they were based on 2008 studies. Things have changed since 2008 up in North Valleys. Anyhow, just take those in consideration. Thanks.
Thank you. Don't forget to
I
fill
need
out
you to
one of
fill
those
out a
forms.
comment card, please. Thank you.
Any other comments on this item before I close public comment, please?
And I'll fill one of those
Thank you.
Sorry. I didn't know I wanted to say anything till I heard everybody else talking. Julie Stone, I'll fill out a paper in a second. I'm on the back of Lemon Valley off of Oregon Boulevard. So I'm curious to know, our property value is right now about 260, and they're gonna build new houses, not on an acre and a half of land, that are gonna sell for 315. Our property value is not going up because we are sitting in Swan Lake, essentially. And if you haven't driven by it, excuse me, if you haven't driven by it recently, you should, because the smell is something everybody should get to experience.
Thank you. Other comments on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close public comment and bring it back to the commission for questions. Who'd like to start us off on questions? Commissioner Marshall.
Okay. Jeff. I was trying to reconcile the school numbers that were provided in the packet for Silver Dollar and then Vista Enclave. And they're same, except for elementary, which is a bit odd since they're right across the road from each other. But I guess that's the dividing line for different elementary schools.
So, do you have yours?
So what we've got is particularly the high school seems to be the one that's over capacity. It's for Silver Dollar, it's going from 99 to 104, but for Vista Enclave, it says it's going from 99 to 99. So wouldn't the base be 104 and then we'd be adding on to that?
Okay, can you ask that question one more time? There's a couple things happening here. Our projects may have come in at different times and had different numbers based on enrollment at the time of the application. My application came in much earlier than Heather's application did. When it comes to the number, the number's calculated based on students driven by the number of units in a specific division or a specific subdivision. And because Heather's project has less number of units, it's going to generate less students.
Oh, I understand that. What I'm asking is the numbers don't correlate to each other in terms of, so they're just done at different times, and so therefore, but we're approving them at the same time. So how do we get a consistent set of numbers?
I think Mike Boster's here. He can address the concerns.
Thank you.
Good evening. For the record, I'm Mike Boster with the school district.
Do I need to repeat the question for you? So
Well, I'm just trying to figure out what you're asking.
okay, for the Vista Enclave item that's on our agenda, the letter is dated from the school district. Is dated January 25th, 2018, and it has North Valley's high school at 99%. And O'Brien Middle School at 78. And then for Silver Dollar, it has O'Brien at 60. And North Valley's ending up at 104, starting at 99. But, so, first of all, what are the right numbers for O'Brien? Obviously, I think, let me just get you the data on the.
And if I may, Trustee Marshall.
September 25th, 2017. So is the difference in numbers we're getting because they're issued at different times?
Indeed, they are, yes. We have what are called count days every year in about September, October. So those numbers will change. They are dynamic every single year, not only per the count day, but each school has different programs located in it for ESL or gifted and talented programs. Sometimes the capacity of the school, whether it can physically hold 600 students, say, if you do dedicate a classroom or two to a different program, for a year or two. That will reduce the capacity of that school for that time period. And yes, they do. They change every year, the capacities of the school and the enrollments as well.
Okay. Would you have included, I guess for the, how do we get an aggregate number for these two projects, the effect on these schools? We would have to ourselves aggregate these two sets of numbers and do the math. Maybe there's a better question for staff.
And if I may, I think on the district side, we would prefer that we would provide that to you. We can give you current data. If you needed something that's completely up to date, we can aggregate those numbers for you. Not right this second probably, but I can certainly do that.
Okay. In either event, it doesn't look like it's going above 104%. Is that I'm kind of I don't know who I should be asking this question of when you combine both. Is that a reasonable assumption on the cumulative impact of these two projects?
Is that the high school number?
That's the high school.
High school, it is indeed. And in fact, if you look at what the school district is doing district-wide, we're building elementaries, middles, and even a high school at Wild Creek is still on the plans. So we've got new facilities in the wings, but you're correct. At the moment right now, 104%, North Valley's high school, that sounds reasonable. I'm not looking at the numbers at the moment, but that does sound reasonable.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I keep going, or should I?
Please.
Cede the floor. Jeff? The applicant's representative said something a little that struck me as a little surprising, and that's that fundamentally NDOT does not consider the 395-80 interchange to be below the level service. Is this a engineering question that you want to hand off?
I'm going to hand it off to Janelle Thomas.
Okay. Thanks, Janelle. That there is, they consider the interchange to not be operating in an unacceptable level of service. So does that mean that they would not be scheduling any improvements to that intersection?
Janelle Thomas, Senior Civil Engineer for the record. I would not conclude that that is the intent of their statement. I believe that there are numerous projects on their capital improvement program which include improvements all along this corridor. It doesn't mean that that they don't have plans for improvements along this stretch of highway, but at this point, the analysis that's been provided, it hasn't caused them undue concern.
So would that lead then to a different prioritization of their CIP projects, given that it's not within?
No, I believe that the level of service D that was cited is a standard of the practice, and that is an acceptable level regionally for the operations of our facilities in this region. So that's why there isn't an immediate concern.
And do we anticipate with developments north of 395 for that intersection to drop to an unacceptable condition?
I can't state that for sure. I know that there have been analyses with various developments throughout our region, and I know that the last planned unit development that you reviewed, the Stonegate development, which was just approved last evening at the regional board, it does have conditions attached to it that are tied to regional projects of significance along that highway corridor. So there are projects that are scheduled for that stretch.
And maybe other commissioners might have better information, or you might know, but just in terms of, I remember seeing, some of our issues is that NDOT is not programming in either the short or middle term improvements to the Spaghetti Bowl. Is that Do I
That's
remember
not
that? Or
my
there is no money available that's,
So the most
Or-
recent information that I have available is that there are some early action items which are being addressed regarding the Spaghetti Bowl ultimate development, and that the Spaghetti Bowl is moving forward. It does have a timeline in which certain components have to be addressed, namely environmental impacts and doing all of the analyses that allow them to construct that project of regional significance.
I guess where it leads me is to trying to figure out our concurrence finding based on, we're basing it on in lieu fees and coming up with some kind of road impact fee that is then aggregated and put towards improvements, including local roads, regional roads, and I understand also the 395. And so how is it that those improvements are going to take place within a reasonable time to offset the additional traffic generated from these, not insignificant size subdivisions north of
So the regional
395.
transportation plan, which is our 2040 plan for the region, does include in the first 10 years regional road improvements, including, I believe, Sky Vista is on that 10-year CIP for the expansion from 2 to 4 lanes.
But for the interchange of 395 and 80, that's wholly within NDOT's control?
Correct. And there was a North Valley's study performed by RTC, and they have developed projects for that study that was completed, I believe, by Traffic Works, and there are various project improvements which are currently being implemented, some of which include ramp metering and various improvements at the Lemon interchange. I believe that that's the one that is of concern this evening in your opinion regarding this particular project. Is that correct?
No, I'm more concerned about the functioning of the Spaghetti Bowl. I think we have issues regarding other regional roads, but quite honestly, I'm not familiar.
And that is still scheduled. It is still moving forward. Like I said, the early action items, there are some early action items, including some ramp improvements on either edge of the Spaghetti Bowl, which are moving forward on a more expedited level that don't require those EIS studies to be completed prior to that development being completed.
And my last question, I don't know if this is for you or not, but why not impose the same kind of phasing conditions on all North Valley's projects and not just Stonegate? Is this because Stonegate is so many units?
Yep.
And this is a more reasonable number of 600 and something? Is that
Yeah,
fundamentally?
5,000 versus 619 is quite a difference. And so that was a recommendation that we resulted in that particular development, which will occur over a probably 20-year timeframe.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
That's all I have.
Commissioner Griffith?
Commissioner Griffith, for the record. Janelle, I just had a clarifying question while you're still up there. What is if we have a level of service of D, what comes next in a negative route? Is that
As far as lettering?
Like what's left?
E and F and
So at what point would NDOT require it, like an emergency standard will jump to the top of the list because the level of service is no longer acceptable?
I believe that they have a program in which they prioritize their projects based upon the level of service in which they identify for the various components of their network that they work on.
Okay.
I have a non-traffic related question, and it was something that came up during public comment that I guess struck me a little bit, and it was related to the sewer connection. And, we have these conditions in the staff report now that require that infrastructure and capacity to be in place. But the question came up regarding the phasing of when that capacity and infrastructure is available versus the potential grading of the property. And can you just help me understand how the timing of those two work together?
Yeah, so I'll kind of walk you through our process for subdivisions. So at the tentative map, we do not dedicate specific quantities of sewer capacity, water capacity, anything like that. So those decisions are made at the final map presentation. So as final maps are presented for review and acceptance and comment through that time period, there is a policy in place that we do allow for mass grading operations to occur on that piece of land which has been submitted for application. So you may see some sites moving forward with mass grading operations on their site prior to actual receipt of that final permit. But they do have obligations to provide bonding for revegetation of that site and for restoration of that site should the project not move forward. There's also, a litany of stormwater controls that have to be addressed on the site in order to eliminate sediment transport and excess water runoff from the site. So, but as we go through the review process, that's when the final determination is made as to whether those capacities are available, and that's when those will serve letters are issued. Jeff was absolutely correct in his statement that it is currently on a first come, first served basis. We do not issue will serve letters for reservations of capacity. So we only do that at the final map stage. And I'll just kind of reiterate what was presented by John Flansburgh previously, but there is a strategy and a plan in place for the addressing of future decreases in capacity at the Reno Stead plant. So right now, the current capacity is at 2 MGD, million gallons per day. That is the current operating capacity. It is currently operating at approximately 1.7 MGD. There is a short-term interim project which is going to add an additional half an MGD, so 0.5 MGD, to that plant capacity by pumping that over to the Tumwharf facility on the river. So that will essentially bring our capacity up to 2.5 at that facility. So the strategy that we have in place regarding allocation is that when the plant capacity with the will serves considered reaches approximately 90% of that capacity, or 2.25 MGD, staff will pursue direction, receiving direction from our council regarding that last allocation. And that will be determined at the time frame that capacity reaches that level, and it will also be analyzed based upon when the improvement project for that plant expansion to 4 MGD is anticipated to complete. So Public Works is currently in the process of having the plans finalized. They are anticipating going out to bid for that plant expansion probably early first quarter of next year. And then it will take about 18 to 24 months to construct that facility expansion.
So you said 2.5 as the new cap because the
Yes.
0.5 is being moved over to Tumwharf.
Correct.
And Tumwharf has the capacity within its environmental permit with the state to accommodate that
Correct.
MGD increase. So can it be increased more, or is the 0.5 the cap based on that permit capacity?
0.5 is about all that we can anticipate being able to take over in the facility which is in place. So what the strategy is in this project is that there's currently a sludge line that runs from the Reno Stead plant, and it pumps over about 3 hours a day over to the Tumwharf system. They are going to repurpose that line, and they believe that they can pump raw sewage rather than just the sludge in that limited time period during the day. They can pump it in that capacity of 0.5 MGD.
And before anything moves forward with this project, other than potentially grading, which is a little concerning, but with anything moves forward in terms of development that's going to hook into a sewer line, that system has to be proved.
Yes, yes. Staff is very diligently and accurately tracking what those will serve letters are. And then we have continual updates from the Public Works staff regarding the actual operating conditions at the plant.
Okay. Thanks very much for
You
that
bet.
explanation. Other questions on that?
I'll
Commissioner
follow on
Olivas?
that, Janelle. I guess just to kind of dig in, you said that there is a sludge line that pumps over 3 hours per day. Why doesn't it pump more frequently?
Right now, the sludge operations are only required, because of the sludge that's created, that's the amount that they have to pump over. And on a daily basis, that's the amount that is necessary to pump. So they don't have to use it to its full
Okay, I guess I'm just
capability.
simple math and probably fairly close, but they're pumping 3 hours a day and they get 500,000 gallons. If they repurpose it to effluent, they could almost pump the whole capacity of the plant rather than dumping it into the lake. Well, so why would they continue pumping it into the lake if the lake is near capacity?
So the lake is set up to take a certain amount of effluent, and as the data that we provided to you, several months ago now, that information is that it's staying at a constant level, that the effluent is not negatively impacting the level of the lake.
I guess I'm not the one laughing, but I can see why they do, because when the lake is getting full, we're continuing to put more on top of it. I guess that seems like a contradiction. Why, when we're setting up barriers, why don't we just pump effluent over to the other plant? And I assume the answer is the cost. Is that, why not pump more than 3 hours a day?
No, there isn't capacity to pump that volume.
So we're only pumping it 3 hours a day?
The capacity that we can pump over in that sludge line is 0.5 MGD. And that is proposed to be pumped over in raw sewage.
Okay. But that's only 3 hours a day. There's more hours in the day.
That would be 24 hours a day is the proposal for the capital improvement project, which is proposed.
Okay, I thought you said that there was only going to be 3 hours a day that they would.
No, current operations are 3 hours a day that the sludge is pumped over.
Okay, so 24 hours is the 500,000.
It needs to be reconfigured with minor modifications in order to accommodate that work.
Okay, that's not what I thought you said. Sorry.
Other questions?
Sorry, Janelle, I forgot, I had some questions on condition 52. This is, and particularly this says, the final design of the project shall ensure that there will be no net increase in the regulatory 100-year water surface elevation of Swan Lake.
Correct.
Does that mean that they have to make sure that that the effluent that's discharged from their, as a result of their project and any stormwater?
That is strictly stormwater.
This is
that is being
strictly
addressed in
stormwater.
this condition.
So this has nothing to do with
No.
effluent?
No. The city is responsible for the management of its effluent from the plant, and they have to operate within their discharge permit parameters.
And that, okay, let me then switch over to, these are pages out of our manual, but, or our packet, but they're not individually numbered. But, so as I understand, the regulatory setup for Swan Lake is that the city has authority to fill up to the 100-year floodplain, essentially, go up to the 100-year floodplain. So as long as it's below that, we can pump effluent into it,
Correct.
regardless of any particular impacts to adjacent land uses.
Correct.
So by going to a 100-year floodplain and not disposing of the effluent in other places, we would be inundating additional development that is not inundated correct now. Is that correct?
Yes and no. So as far as the effluent management strategy is concerned, the city's effluent management is modified throughout the seasons of the year. So there is an effluent usage component during the spring, summer, early fall years or fall months. And so only during the winter months is that effluent not being used as a secondary water resource. So there are, I believe, 3 facilities that currently use effluent on a regular basis during those months in which irrigation can occur. So those are Sierra Sage Golf Course, the North Valleys Regional Park, and there's one other, and I can't think of it right now. But
So we, in essence, the highest risk of flood would be during winter, not summer, when the effluent is being utilized. So we could, so it'd only be flooded 6 months out of the year, not the remainder portions of the year? Is that, or am I being too snide there?
That's a little snide.
Yeah.
But so I will also add that our Public Works Department is working on other pilot projects in order to discharge of effluent and coming up with other mechanisms to remove water, and not just effluent, but water from Swan Lake. And I believe that John Flansburgh went through that in his presentation. There are a few different options that are out on the table right now, including Bedell Flats and
an actual plan. We have a bunch of possibilities that may prove fruitful, but right now it's in the planning stations of a planning stages of a plan.
that are showing promise.
Thank you.
Commissioner Griffith?
Commissioner Griffith, for Janelle again. So it was brought up earlier, the grading. So would that be an option for the Planning Commission to apply a condition that they would, before the mass grading, before they get their final permit, that they would have to have some checkoffs, like that they couldn't do that until their final map is put through? Is that something we could condition?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for Janelle, staff, applicant? Okay. Commissioner Weisky, do you want to weigh in at all? Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your acknowledgement of me showing up late this evening, but I don't have any questions at this time.
Thank you. Who'd like to start us off on discussion then? Commissioner Hawkins.
For the record, Commissioner Hawkins, we've seen this several times, and I think it's time to do something.
Thank you.
Yeah. I can be
agree.
a
We
little
need to
more
do-
specific.
Yeah, some specifics would be helpful.
I have problems with numerous findings, not because of the project itself, which I would like to commend the applicant for bringing forward such a project, but they're stuck with regional issues that are not being solved. So I would first like to say thank you for bringing a project that has multifamily in it, that has, the amount of, some amount of open space and public recreation areas and the school site. So, and that troubles me that that I can't support the findings on this project when otherwise it would be a good project, but for situations that are quite honestly out of their control. And I find that a depressing situation. Good projects, which I can't support because we have regional issues regarding traffic and effluent disposal. And so when we are faced with a situation where, we have two North Valley's projects on our agenda today, and there's more to come, and we are continually adding additional effluent to Swan Lake as a result of these projects without any plan of how we're going to address the situation, whether it's buying these people out, condemning the land. But fundamentally, right now, we can continue approving these projects up until the 100-year floodplain before there's any sort of regulatory stop. And that's going to cause additional flooding to folks who, yes, they built below the floodplain back when, but I can't say that I can make a finding that the proposed use is compatible with existing surrounding land uses and development. It's troubling me that we can't come up with a public works solution to this issue and allow development to, good development to proceed in a responsible manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, wait. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, Commissioner Griffith. I wasn't sure.
Commissioner Griffith, for the record, I wanted to piggyback on Commissioner Marshall's comments because I thought not only is the project something that we've been looking for, but the application is more thorough than what we've been given in the past. So when we're looking at things like the North Valleys, that's been really tough for this commission. It was nice to see the extra efforts and the extra calculations that were put into this one that we don't always see. So I think this gives us more information to be working off of. And that's something that I think would be helpful in the future, that when people are applying with this and we know the issues going into it, that it was good to highlight them right off the bat. So we don't have to be assuming those. We can look at it and we can address this as it sits in front of us, not kind of more assumptions on us when it should be applicant.
Commissioner Gower, I'll respond to that and to Commissioner Marshall's comments. We've seen this item a number of times, and the concern for me personally, as one of 6 who's able to vote on this item, really the main concern is the water in Swan Lake for obvious reasons. I was with Commissioner Marshall and sharing his concerns in those initial meetings. I feel like now the city is responding, coming up with solutions. The system has not been proven yet, but the conditions that are part of this proposal are such that the system has to be proved before the project can move forward. So with that level of confidence and without any sort of specific direction from our city council to initiate a moratorium or anything like that, based on what's in front of me with these conditions, I can make all of the findings.
I'd like to respond to that if I could, because I think that has to do with the sewer capacity side, not the effluent disposal side.
Commissioner Marshall, we just heard Janelle say that 500,000 gallons of effluent is going to be pumped over to Tumwharf to accommodate the effluent discharge.
Right.
Did I understand that right?
No, I think you did. But the issue is, for me, is, this is going to add a marginal amount. This one. The next one will add a marginal amount. And the next one will add a marginal amount. And so the prediction is that the capacity is going to exceed 0.5. And, of the 2.5, it may already be exceeding it now because we're flooding people's homes now. or people's homes are flooded. And, you know, part of what's going into the lake is effluent. Now, maybe that some of the additional effluent, addition to the lake, may be diverted elsewhere. And it's, you know, that would be the 0.5 million gallons, or excuse me, yes, MGDs.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that either the current situation or any capacity above the 0.5 will be that impact will be avoided. Only that 0.5. And the question in my mind, and I liked your suggestion of having a condition that fundamentally does the same thing on the effluent side as it does on the demand side, the sewer capacity side, which is you can't discharge until there is an adopted plan that disposes of, you know, in a responsible manner, that either these people are bought out or that there's a plan that you're not going to flood additional people. Even though you're going up to, you know, even though you have the legal authority to go up to the 100-year floodplain, to do that, you are putting people underwater. And that's something I don't think we should be doing. And unfortunately, it's each project has a marginal impact to that. And so that's where I'm not certain I'm at the same spot, but if there was a condition that said, you know, you can't build until there's an adopted plan to, you know, resolve the effluent side, that might be something I could support.
Other commissioners want to weigh in on that? Commissioner Gower, in addition to that, I like the suggestion that Commissioner Griffith had regarding the grading. That was a concern of mine and one that I hadn't really contemplated fully, but you know, we saw that after 2006, you know, all these properties were mass graded and they kind of sat there vacant for a long time. I know we're not hopefully going to have that situation again, but I think that was a good suggestion. If something like that is in place where a plan has to be there before something can move forward, so we avoid having a mass graded plot for 2 years. Maybe there's a combination here that we can work with. Commissioner Hawkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Right now, the only thing that's really been mass graded where there's not been a lot of work is the lakes at Sky Vista. And they've got their own set of problems with some sewer pumping and all that, and that doesn't need to come around. But I just want to say that Stead 40 is continually cutting pads for their homes over there as we speak, or not quite now, but earlier today. And they're preparing pads for homes to be built on them. They're not idle right now. There's crews there working every day. Same thing with the one right next to me on Military. They're building houses every day over there, and they have 192 on the schedule to be built. So the only thing that's really sitting there that's mass graded, and it's a huge mass grading, is at the lakes. I mean, they've got their share of problems that they'll deal with and rectify, but right now, that is the only one that's not being worked because of those problems.
If I can jump in, if we can get Janelle up, we have an existing policy regarding mass grading and mapping. So if she can cover that, it might address your question. We may not need to condition.
Yeah, so as, again, Janelle Thomas for the record, the mass grading policy that we do have in place currently, it does put in those safety net provisions for appropriate bonding and security for restoration of the site. So I'm not sure if that gives you greater comfort, but the reason that that policy was put in place was to protect from the projects that did go stale during the recession. Right now, what we're seeing is that as projects are being pursued, as Commissioner Hawkins just mentioned, they are pursuing work in a diligent manner. The lakes is an exception to that rule. That is a project which is experiencing some challenges with how to connect to the sewer system. And they're trying to work out those details at this point.
Mr. Weisky?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Janelle, so does that mean that mass grading permits are not being issued for a development like this at this time without the project being provided with will-serve letters?
So the will serve letters are issued between the 30-day submittal and the 15-day submittal, which are the first two steps in the final map process. And so after they've submitted for their 30-day submittal, their first submittal, they are allowed per our policy to apply for a mass grading permit on that particular property that encompasses that area.
So it's their submission, not their approval.
Correct.
So their submission could be denied, but they could be allowed a mass grading permit and dirt could be turned. Can we condition against that, or would that
You
be
could.
going against city policy that would prevent us?
No, I was just trying to explain that we do have a policy in order to secure that permit. But if the Planning Commission chooses to kind of remove that ability from the developer to pull that early mass grading permit, that is definitely within your purview to add a condition to that effect. And what I will add in conjunction with that statement is that that is the way that projects were pursued previously to this policy being put in place, is that we did not issue the early mass grading permits. And so when the project was presented, that project was only pursued once that site improvement permit was approved and the final map recorded.
Thank you, Janelle. Commissioner Gower, or Chair Gower, excuse me, I hope that helps a little bit. I mean, I could see us as a commission adding a condition to that to both protect the city, the community, and the developer, all three entities, from progressing forward. And then in support of Commissioner Marshall's discussion items and a little bit of line of questioning that I got when I got here, you know, the concern of whether or not there will be available capacity at the time the permit is requested, or the map is requested in this case. And if a mass grading permit is not issued until the will serves are issued, then we would not have nobody would be able to have anything going on out there until all entities have signed off. Does that make sense? I mean, it kind of makes sense to me, and I think that's also in support of, you know, what Commissioner Marshall and Commissioner Hawkins is discussing as far as, you know, do we have ground that's opened up, and are we going to have mass grading of how many acres and then no development because a decision is made to deny later?
If I can jump in a little bit more on that, that condition is fine. We've done that in the past. As Janelle mentioned, that is the way that we move forward with all maps prior to that policy going into place. I would recommend that you, if you do put that in place, that you keep that in mind as we move forward with other tentative maps and just make that consistent with all tentative maps that you move forward with.
Okay. So I think that's one piece, and I appreciate Commissioner Weisky and Griffith and Hawkins taking us down that path to get to, I think, what is a good condition that we can add. Just want to close the loop on Commissioner Marshall's discussion point, which was related to more of a plan in place, Commissioner Marshall, if I'm not mistaken, for you to be able to make those findings. You're talking beyond a will serve letter and more of a plan, a North Valley's effluent discharge plan. Is that what you're talking about, or am I putting words in your mouth?
I think and I'm not certain how to frame, it's a difficult condition to write because I'm trying to figure out what is the functional thing we want to accomplish. And to me, it's being able to show that we're not going to be harming existing surrounding development. And to do that, either they need to be bought out or there has to be other alternative disposal, whether we're shipping everything down to the Truckee River, but then we obviously have got some issues there, or we're, doing the injection wells, or we're shipping it to California, through Long Valley, or whatever the solution is that we have a solution so that we can resolve this outstanding issue. So I would be looking for a condition that would say, not that we are limiting them to the 100-year floodplain, because that's just going to inundate more people that we're inundating now, but that and I don't know what the functional key part of the condition would be, or how to say it, but fundamentally that the tension that we're seeing now is we have a plan to resolve it.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Weisky?
Before you bring Janelle up to the microphone, can I add something to that, please?
Please.
For me personally, the only way that I'm able to make the findings on these applications like this is to know that we have stopgaps in place so that at the time an application is made for a building permit or a map to move forward with mass grading or anything, is that it can be, the project can be stopped if we do not have appropriate storage for stormwater and/or effluents or our sewer treatment plants at the time the applications are made at the sewer treatment plant, so that what a developer could be doing now is planning for future development. Maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's 3 years from now. Maybe they're preparing to sell the map and the project as is without ever putting a shovel in the ground. But the only way I can make these findings and vote in favor of these projects is knowing that when it comes before staff, that staff all the way through the health department and everybody that reviews it and puts their initials on the document can say, no, we do not have the capacity at this time. We cannot issue a permit to allow it to go forward. And I look for those conditions. I look for that, although a map can be approved, it cannot be executed and built on until the capacities are available. Thank you.
Thank you. Janelle, are those stopgaps in place? Jeff, are those stopgaps in place in terms of the conditions and what's written in here and the understanding of staff to provide those assurances to the city and the public?
Yes, so Janelle Thomas for the record. Those stopgaps are in place. And what I wanted to add is that the city's effluent discharge is under the jurisdiction of NDEP. They provide the permit for that discharge, and they have jurisdiction over that permit. The city continues to operate within the parameters of that permit that has been issued to the city. So we are not allowed to exceed the effluent discharge limitations on that particular permit. So I just wanted to kind of add that clarification. I know that Commissioner Marshall, I understand your concern, but I also want to assure you that the city is working within the parameters of the permit which has been issued.
Well, I never doubted you weren't. The problem is, as I understand it, is the terms of the permit to allow you to go the 100-year floodplain will result in additional flooding of homes. So if Swan Lake reaches a 100-year floodplain, there's going to be more homes inundated than there are now. So we are not, in my view, being compatible with existing development. If the result of all these cumulative effects of these subdivisions is adding more water in this closed basin, and as Commissioner Leva says, when we're in those flood conditions, we are adding additional water to Swan Lake, and we're part of what's causing the inundations of these homes, and we can continue to do it legally vis-a-vis our permit. But the question is, should we do it? Not can we legally do it?
I will also verify that we are below that elevation at this point. Unfortunately, yes, there are homes that are built within the floodplain. It is unfortunate, but we still have not reached that elevation.
Exactly.
And we're embarking on the months in which that level will be decreased of effluent going into Swan Lake, as well as accelerated evapotranspiration on the lake surface as the temperatures rise in the coming months.
Right, but should we continue to approve projects that will add to the amount of water in Swan Lake, that will increase the level of Swan Lake such that we're inundating additional homes? And if I see this problem as, if that's not the right, or technically correct, then I'd love to be corrected on that. But that's what it's not so much that we are at, we're below the legal level that NDEP allows us to discharge. It's that level of discharge, and anything in addition to that causes conflict with the existing uses in the North Valleys. So that, to me, is our major source, or my major source of problem with our findings, making the findings, even though we have the legal ability to do it under the permit, under our NDEP permit.
Commissioner Olivas.
Commissioner Olivas, I'll add on to that, and you're you're following on to some of my comments, and I guess one thing that I struggle with here too is that, and I've used the 5-gallon bucket analogy before. If you've got 6 gallons of water and the 5-gallon bucket overflows, which gallon is the gallon that causes it to overflow? Is it the last one that actually spilled over, or is it the first one that was legally put in there because it was below the level? I got a problem with that, because if there was only going to be 6 gallons in total, and we put in that gallon first, we can't just absolve and throw up our hands and say it's not our fault, because Mother Nature would have only put in the 5 and it would have been fine. So I don't like the methodology of how the permit came about, and I don't think that that's right. I agree that because we legally can, doesn't mean that the approach was right. I guess that said, one of the things that I look at throughout, and I've seen a lot of progress on this, and the effluent and the pumping, and I'd say with the traffic too, is that things are in motion to improve it. And in one of the findings, there are or will be adequate services. And I guess I kind of hang my hat on the there will be, because I've seen a lot of work and a lot of progress, and I hope it continues. And if it slows up and doesn't continue, my faith in the process would falter. I like the idea if we could put a condition on maybe somehow forcing that progress to continue so people don't get complacent. But I guess it's the or will be that I see the positive coming down in the future. And I think that with that, that's what allows me to more make the findings than what we have right here today. And if we can put some parameters around that to put the brakes on it when the brakes need to be put on, I'd be all for that.
Commissioner Olivas, I liked your analogy, and I just want to play off of it for a second. But I think, if I understand correctly, what we're talking about here is two scenarios with that bucket, your 6 gallons of water and your 5-gallon bucket. So I believe what Commissioner Marshall is talking about is conditioning the development similar to the way we do with stormwater discharge, that the water that is generated from the site will stay within the bounds of that 5-gallon bucket, so the bucket is big enough. What the city of Reno is trying to do is increase the size of the bucket through strategies, or keep the 5-gallon bucket and put a tube in it and move the other gallon somewhere else. So the stopgaps that Commissioner Weisky are in place for me to ensure that the scenario number 2, the bucket with the tube going somewhere else or increasing the size of the bucket, are in place before the 5 gallons is put into it from all of these projects, not just this one. I fully understand where Commissioner Marshall is coming from also with the permit. I don't know if that's within our purview. I mean, that's something that I've never heard legal counsel weigh in on here, but we're operating within the parameters of our permit, and I agree, it's a could versus a should scenario. I don't think I have a good answer for you on that, but in terms of the findings that we have to make as the City of Reno Planning Commission, using Commissioner Olivas's bucket scenario and the assurances that Commissioner Weisky has talked about and the grading assurances that Commissioner Griffith brought up, I feel like all those pieces are in place for me, again, to be able to make these findings. I'd be curious to hear other feedback on that. And as Commissioner Hawkins first noted, what'd you say? Need some action.
We've been doing this since November. That's a long time to sit on the pot. It's time we get off and do some action. One way or another, we leave tonight, something's going to be done, whether it's for or against the project. I'm for the project. I don't believe that your 5-gallon scenario, I love the verbiage there, but let's say we didn't have the effluent going into Swan Lake, and we take the rain that we received last year as well as this year, and it overflowed the lake. We can't blame God. We can't blame anybody, because that's just nature and the beast of being in a closed basin. So I've got to say I approve of the project with the conditions that are been brought forward, but we can't blame the city of Reno and the effluent on Mother Nature's problems for the amount of water that we're putting into the lake. 1,800 acres, I believe, is what they're saying that lake size is. I can't go there. You know, we've had John Flansburgh give us his word that he's working on things, and he's got some good prospective areas that he wants to take that effluent to. I think we ought to give him a shot. And I'm all for passing this tonight.
Commissioner Hawkins, you want to take that action into a motion?
I will. Based upon the compliance with the applicable findings on case number LDC 18-00015, Silver Dollar Estates, I move to approve the tentative map and special use permit subject to the conditions.
Commissioner Hawkins, with the addition of certain conditions as discussed,
Yes, Mr. Chair.
does staff need those elaborated upon?
Yes, please.
I think I have a draft written. If that would be okay, I can read it, and if the commission's okay with it. It says, prior to the issuance of a mass grading permit, the applicant shall obtain a sewer will serve letter. I think that's what the discussion was around.
Commissioner Hawkins, does that,
That's sufficient, yes.
okay? I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Commissioner Griffith, I'll second with the conditions in addition.
Okay. Have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion or the second? Commissioner Weisky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to say that based upon the conditions that are provided, the stopgaps that are in here, I am able to make all of the findings. If the conditions were not as thorough as they are and have been written, and the stopgaps are in place, and the future of North Valleys is dependent upon, as we heard last night at Regional Planning, a presentation by Washoe County Health/Sewer, that there is a requirement of growth to pay for the initial costs and the long-term costs of expanding sewer treatment plants and effluent discharges. I wouldn't be able to make all of the findings tonight, but I can make all of the findings tonight based upon the conditions that are presented to us, because I don't believe our staff is going to allow this project forward without controls in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's go to Commissioner Marshall and then Commissioner Griffith.
Oh, Commissioner Griffith, for the record, if this does pass, I did want to bring up to Claudia's point that we make sure we're consistent and that these are added to future projects if this does pass.
Good point. Thank you. Commissioner Marshall.
I can't support approval of the project because there is no stopgap related to effluent discharge. It's just, there isn't one, as I understand how the conditions are written. It's all has to do with stormwater, not effluent disposal. So there is no condition saying you can't proceed unless there is, a plan to resolve.
We just
our
added Commissioner Marshall, Commissioner Wisey, we just added a condition that says there is no will serve letter that will be issued if the sewer treatment plant cannot handle what is going into it and out of it.
Well, it can my problem is that the sewer treatment plant, under how the city is looking at it, they can handle it if they're below the 100-year floodplain. That's the only limit that they are operating under now. It's not a limit that are we adversely affecting people. That's what I need to make the finding. And right now, there's not an effluent control on that side. And I'm not satisfied, unfortunately, with statements by our Public Works Director that they're working on a solution. That's not enough for me to be able to say I can make the finding that we're not going to have a negative impact on existing development. It also, I like your idea of can we rely on a plan to get us there, but we don't have a plan. We have representations, and what I'm looking for to support the project is some sort of requirement that there be a plan that resolves the effluent situation. And I wish I had better language for it, but that's, right now, there isn't a stopgap on the effluent disposal side other than the operating capacity of the plant. And that, to me, is not sufficient to address the effluent lake level question.
Commissioner Gower, I'll just say one more thing related to my vote on this item. We do have a motion and a second on the table here. And this project, from the very beginning, when it came to us back in November, was a catalyst for this discussion in the North Valleys related to stormwater and effluent. And since November, over the past 7 months, I feel as a city, as a planning commission, as staff, the community, we've come a long way in understanding the items out there, understanding the issues, doing something about them. I think, like I said, this Catalyst project has really initiated implementing solutions. So the stopgaps that I feel are in place are going to continue to be a test. This project is going to continue to be a catalyst as these measures are implemented over time. And that's just the way it's going to be. It's just kind of that project. So based on all of that and where we've gotten to tonight with the additional conditions, I feel like we're there for me. Fully respect what Commissioner Marshall says with the issues of the permit, and I hope that between the city and the state of Nevada that those issues can be addressed related to that permit. Have a motion and a second on the floor. Commissioner Olivas has additional discussion.
Yeah, just to kind of, on your comments, I feel that they're there, their progress is being made, and I hang my hat on the progress we're being made and the or will be services, and it's got to continue. I'm really close on, and I'm putting a lot of faith in the fact that it will continue and they will be there, and I just encourage staff in particular, but anybody in the community that can keep that ball moving, because I'm real close, and I could, if I don't see the progress continuing like it has in the 6 months, I could easily go back to that they're not going to be there.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
Nay.
Thank you. Motion carries 5-1. Let's take just a 5-minute recess here. We'll allow Commissioner Johnson to come back in and folks filter out. So just a 5-minute recess here. We'll come back at 7:37. All right, we'll call the Reno City Planning Commission back to order and back to our public hearing items under item 7. The first one, item 7.1, which is case number LDC 18-00079 Coyote Crossing Master Plan and Zoning Map Amendment. That item has been pulled, as you noted in the staff report, due to a noticing error, and that will be coming back around to us at a later date. Item 7.2 then is case number LDC 18-00068. And I believe on this one, we were going to get a brief presentation from staff.
Good evening, Chair Gower and Planning Commission members. Heather Manzo, Assistant Planner for the record. And before you this evening is a request for Project Anute, which is located at the eastern terminus of Lear Boulevard, generally near Swan Lake. The applicant's representative is not here this evening, so I'll provide you with a brief description of what the case request was and staff's recommendation. So the request was to construct a 700,000 square foot industrial building that is located adjacent to residentially zoned property. The residentially zoned property is located to the south as well as to the east of the project site. In staff's analysis of the request, there were several special use permit findings that we were analyzing and were having some challenges making in drafting the report. Those special use permit findings are generally related to compatibility with surrounding areas. With residential adjacency, typically we do look for some verification that the operations will meet the residential adjacency noise standards that are adopted as a part of Title 18. And in addition to that, we do look for building orientation that is going to be most compatible with surrounding residentially zoned properties. In this case, as is noted in the site plan in the packet that you received, the dock doors that are on the south side of the property had the potential of locating a maximum of 54 dock doors directly adjacent to the residentially zoned property. In addition to that, the acoustical analysis that was provided with the request provided two examples of locations within the city of Reno. Both of them were pretty well different from the proposal that's before you this evening, and staff recommended that the applicant update that acoustical analysis prior to making a recommendation to Planning Commission. The applicant was unable to revise their materials in a manner that would address the findings that need to be made for a special use permit. Specifically, as noted in your staff report, special use permit finding A related to compatibility with the surrounding area. Finding E related to location, height, building orientation, site design, that being appropriate to the surrounding area. Special use permit finding F, that the request would not create an adverse environmental impact, which includes noise. And finally, special use permit finding H, related to window placement and building height, that not negatively affect surrounding residential properties. Those are the findings in the staff report staff was unable to make, and staff is recommending denial at this time. That concludes my presentation.
Heather, we're going to go a little bit out of order here, and I have a question for you before we get to disclosures and public comment. But you talk about the project in the past tense. Is it your understanding that the project is not moving forward, that it's essentially a moot project?
With staff's recommendation for denial and the fact that the applicant's representative is not here to support their request, I would say that this project probably would not be moving forward. We have not received any request for withdrawal at this time. They have requested that the item be heard by the Planning Commission, and I'll turn it over to Claudia for further clarification.
Claudia Hinson, Planning Manager. I just want to clarify, if we have not heard anything in writing, then I would say we continue to move forward on this project and just consider the project with the associated findings.
Okay. So we'll go through then with that information. And I'll ask for disclosures from the Planning Commission first. Before we get to the public hearing items, Commissioner Olivas.
No disclosures.
Commissioner Marshall, no disclosures.
Commissioner Johnson, I received an email from the applicant's representative. No disclosures.
Commissioner Gower, I spoke briefly with the applicant's former representative.
Commissioner Griffith, I also received an email from the applicant's representative.
Commissioner Hawkins received emails, visited the site, talked to the applicant's representative.
Commissioner Weisky, I visited the site and spoke with the applicant's former representative.
Thank you. So with that, I will open public comment and start it off with Craig Durbin, followed by Danny Cleus.
Thank you very much. My name is Craig Durbin, for the record. I had a prepared statement that I was going to make. However, I don't wish to beat a dead horse. I wish to thank Commissioner Marshall for his comments regarding the flooding in Lemon Valley. It goes without saying that I support my fellow Lemon Valley residents that flooding is a great concern. Regarding this specific project and how it affects me, I am near this development, not directly adjacent, however, quite near it. And the representation by staff that the up to 54 dock doors on the south side of this would be directly facing my property. This is of great concern to me, especially since truck traffic is not quiet, especially when backing up to a dock door. The backup alarms on those trucks, they range anywhere from 100 to 115-ish decibels, directly adjacent to a residential area. The proposed landscaping and wall would not alleviate that sound. It would be very noisy. And that is pretty much the extent of my concerns that I was ready to present today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Danny Cleus, followed by Tammy Holt-Still.
Danny Cleus for the record. These projects are getting closer and closer to the lake. Bigger and bigger warehouses. Do we really need it? No. Like I've stated before, everything affects that lake. Everything that happens up there, doesn't matter how far south, how far north, everything affects that lake. I was asked to ask you this. So if a house is burning down, do you put out the fire or do you wait till it rains? This really needs to be a solution for that lake. Nobody wants to do anything with that lake. Why? Everybody says, oh, this isn't going to affect it. This isn't going to affect it. Mother Nature did this. Well, I'm sorry to say, we have the rain records for the Stead area, not the Reno area. This wasn't the wettest winter. So what's the difference? We've had wetter winters and didn't flood like this. What is the difference? I'll tell you what the difference is. Warehouses. They're everywhere over there. Big subdivisions. Everywhere. Retention, detention ponds. They don't work, but yet they're required. Nobody's there. No code enforcement for them or nothing. But they're there. But they don't do anything. And that is very clear from the last rain with the Amazon. The upper ponds, nothing in them. Middle ponds, overflowing into the parking lot. Lower ponds, half full. These sites that you guys want to build, and I'll say it again, this is a closed basin. Nobody has a permanent fix. Sewer. There's a study going by you and our guys. 3 years from now is when that study is going to be done. Injection. Has anybody done the federal rules and regulations on that? You have Mr. Flansburgh. Speaking of numbers, NDEP's numbers are way different than the city of Reno's numbers. They're different than the Washoe County's numbers. And if you listen to Dwayne Smith from Washoe County, he doesn't give you a definite answer on anything. It was proven last night. He danced around every question. Here's another big one. This came from Councilmember Paul McKenzie. Just verified what we've been telling you. That Lemon Valley plant is going to close. Where is that going to go? Think about it.
Thank you. Tammy, hold still.
Tammy Holt Still, Lemon Valley Swan Lake Recovery Committee. For the record, I am not going to be discussing that issue, but I am going to be discussing the total tentative map issue. It's time for each and every one of you, including your council and including your staff, to learn the NRSs. It states right in the NRSs that NDEP, health and welfare, and environmental and everything else is supposed to be contacted, and you should have a letter within 15 days for approval or denial before a tentative map is confirmed or denied by you. Do you have that? If you are doing a will call or will serve at final map, that doesn't meet the tentative map NRSs. You're violating statute. Each and every one of you are in violation of the statute. Doesn't that be important to you at all? I know it does to me. I had to follow the statutes when I worked for the state of Nevada. Otherwise, my butt was fired. You guys should be in the same boat. And that goes for Washoe County and it goes for Sparks. I have noticed, even with regional, you guys are skipping over what is required by law to protect the residents. It is time for you to step up and start protecting the residents. I am disappointed in all of you, and this idea about storm being the only issue, come on. Each and every one of you know about aquifer injection. You know that the groundwater table is up too high, so it can't saturate into the ground. You have development, or you have a project going on Lemon Drive to make your stormwater run faster into Swan Lake. That is causing a traffic jam for the last 3 months that you're not taking care of. We've had it. We're done with it. And we're done with you guys approving stuff, albeit maybe good for the future. But until you understand closed basins, you should not be approving anything. And you guys are not certified to understand the hydrological areas. You haven't done your education. I don't have an education on it, but I have had to sit there and read hours and hours of this stuff to understand what is going on for our basin. Have you? Good question.
Thank you. Any other comments on item 7.2? Please.
I'll fill out the paper out.
Thank you.
For the record, Ron De Silva again. Thanks for listening. This particular project was one that was originally interested in. I live on Mayan Drive, which would be along the south side of this proposed project. I could not, I looked through meticulously through the application. Maybe somebody else, if the representative isn't here, maybe the city, can go ahead and let me know. Mayan, I realize on Lear Boulevard, they show their east and their west access for the trucks. My question is, if Mahan Drive, the tentative, the map that they showed, did not show a connection of Mahan Drive to the parking lot on the south side. So I'd like to know if, because there's always, Lear Boulevard is obviously made for the truck and trailer traffic. It was extended out with a huge center island. I mean, it's I don't know what the width is, 60 foot, it's 3 or 4. It's at least 3 full lanes. My concern is that truckers from out of the area are just going to GPS it. Google says, turn right here in Mahan. And so I'm going to have these semis going down a residential street in front of me. When I'm sure their main access is supposed to be Lear Boulevard. So there was that on the one hand. The other was, which my neighbor Craig has brought up before, the tentative map, especially with architectural layout, looks great. We have the berm along the side facing the residential property. We show the vegetation plans there. And what we haven't seen is follow-up on enforcement by code enforcement afterwards. If you look at the existing warehouses that were there on Lear Boulevard, across from much closer to military, what it looks like, as opposed to this nice green barrier we have of plantings, it looks like somebody got their landscaper over to Moana Nursery, bought 25-gallon trees and stuck them along the edge of the canal, and that was it. So twofold. I mean, what looks here is fine, but I'm concerned about the code enforcement after the project, and then I had specific questions on any way to make sure we had non-truck traffic on Mahan Boulevard. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments on this item? Okay, seeing none, I will close public comment and bring it back to the commission, noting the feedback that staff gave us at the beginning and where the project stands. I'd certainly entertain questions or discussion.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Weisky, for the record, based on a couple of facts, one, that the applicant is not here. The applicant does not have a representative here. Staff has not received any information or changes to their application, and staff's proposed denial of their project. I cannot make findings A, E, and F either, and at this time, in the sense of timing or time spent on this, I'm proposed to make a motion right now.
Okay. I would certainly like to hear it.
In case number LDC 18-00068, project anew. Based upon compliance with the applicable findings, I move to deny the special use permit as I am unable to make the following SUP findings, A, E, and F.
Thank you. Have a motion. How about a second?
Commissioner Johnson, I'll second that, and I am also unable to make findings A, E, F, and H based on the orientation of the doors.
Okay. Thank you very much. Have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. Motion carries. Move on to item 7.3, which is case number LDC 18-00075 Summit Ridge Townhomes. And we will start out with a presentation from the applicant or the applicant's representative. Welcome.
Okay, good evening. For the record, Susan Pansky with Rubicon Design Group on behalf of Desert Wind Homes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This project is a request for a tentative map and special use permit for 57 single-family attached townhomes on a 2.9 acre infill site that's located in the Community Commercial Zoning District on the corner of Summit Ridge Drive and Sky Mountain Drive. This is the site plan showing the proposed site plan for the project. As I mentioned, we're requesting approval of 57 single-family attached townhome units. The density is approximately 19.6 units per acre. This project has been designed in a neo-traditional design with the houses loading from the rear off of private alleys that are internal to the project and front doors that face, in most cases, the right-of-way or adjacent properties. We have provided significant pedestrian circulation with sidewalks and pathways throughout the project, as well as extensive parking with 207 spaces, which includes 15 dedicated guest parking spaces, which is 93 spaces higher than the ITE recommendation for townhomes. This is our proposed landscape plan. Our landscape plan includes paver driveways for this project, significant landscaped area for common open space, approximately 27%, I believe. It includes private patios for each one of the units at the front entrances, and as I mentioned, significant pedestrian circulation. This is a proposed preliminary landscape plan that will be modified as we move forward through the process. As I mentioned, a neo-traditional design with the front doors fronting onto the public right-of-way, and then the rear garages to the alleyways. This is a 3-story contemporary design with the top 2 stories being living space, and then the bottom story being garage space with a little bit of living space as well. We have several building configurations. This is an 8-unit sample. We have some 4-unit buildings, and then I think 1 or 2 7-unit buildings as well. The height on this is approximately 35 feet. With significant articulation on both the rear and the front of these buildings. We don't have side yard elevations at this time, but there is a condition in our staff report which we agree with. And then some samples of our proposed floor plans. The 2-bedroom floor plan is approximately 1,652 square feet. It's 2 bedrooms with a 1-car garage, and then the 3-bedroom unit is 1,760 square feet with a 2-car garage. All of the driveways are 20 feet wide or more to allow for parking in the driveways as well as the garages. And I'm going to leave it on the landscape plan. We have reviewed the conditions of approval and agree with them. We're also fine with the sewer tentative map condition if you choose to add it to our conditions today, and I'm happy to answer questions if you have them.
Okay, thank you very much. At this point, I'll turn it over to Heather for a presentation from staff.
Thank you again. Good evening, Heather Manzo, Assistant Planner for the record. The applicant did a great job of illustrating the nature of the request before you this evening. I did want to note that we do have conditions of approval that are recommended within the staff report to limit construction hours. Since this isn't an established neighborhood, we do typically recommend that condition hours be limited to certain days and times of the week. Additionally, there is an existing reciprocal access and parking agreement that surrounds this site. It includes the commercial properties as well as the property directly to the north of this project. That, because there is may I please have the landscape, the presentation the applicant had? Because there is a proposal to eliminate one of the access points that is currently under that reciprocal access agreement, generally located in this area here, that agreement will need to be amended to reflect the project that's before you this evening, and that is a requirement prior to a final map for this request. Additionally, staff did receive 1 call in opposition of the request, and staff's recommending approval. We were able to make all of the findings associated with the tentative map and special use permit, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have on this.
Okay, thanks very much, Heather. How about disclosures at this point? Commissioner Weisky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rode to the site.
Commissioner Hawkins went past the site.
Commissioner Griffith, no disclosures.
Commissioner Gower, I viewed the site.
Commissioner Johnson, no disclosures.
Commissioner Marshall, no disclosures.
Commissioner Olivas, I visited the site.
Thank you. At this point, I'll open up public comment. Michelle, do you have any requests to speak forums on this item?
No, I do not.
Okay, anyone wishing to make a comment on this item, 7.3? Okay, seeing none, we'll close that portion of the item and bring it back to the commission for questions. Commissioner Marshall.
Heather, can you just walk me through, I don't understand the alternative parking rate. I understand the numbers, but the reason why it was why we're even looking at it, because from the chart, it looks like it's adequately parked without the alternative standards, but maybe I'm not looking at understanding what's going on.
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that. Heather Manzo, Assistant Planner for the record again. So in our code, we do have the ability to accept alternative parking rates that are provided by a nationally recognized and accepted publication that includes ITE as well as others. In this case, if we were to utilize Reno Municipal Code standards and with the requirement to park not only per bedroom for each of the units, but also for one parking space for every unit for guest parking, the application was 3 parking spaces deficient of what code would require. So in this case, the total provided is 207 parking spaces, and that alternative ITE rate was provided to show that there are nationally accepted parking rates that are well below what the applicant is providing for this request.
And maybe this is a little perverse logic, but so it's actually substantially overparked for the standards that we're using.
It is adequately parked for the request that's before you this evening.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Hawkins.
Got a question on condition 20. If we have all this parking inside there, why are we asking for street parking?
So that condition is related to Sky Mountain Drive that is adjacent to the site. And that road has adequate width to provide on-street parking to the general public. It's not being counted toward the parking that's being provided with this request. But with that, it's not currently striped at this time to allow for the on-street parking to be identified on Sky Mountain, and so that condition is related to the striping on Sky Mountain.
Okay, one other question. That Great Western Marketplace that's next to them is supposed to be a storage place. How's that going to affect the zoning and all of putting a residence, those townhomes there?
Michelle, may I please have, if the presentation has an overall aerial, I'd like to see that. Otherwise, I can go to case maps. True. My printouts are not very good quality tonight, so if I can, I'll use
The reason
this.
why I ask is so many times as a commission, we're doing residential adjacency, 300 feet and all. Just want to know, it's flip-flop now. We're putting residents next to a warehousing facility, and I want to get everything squared away and straightened up, though.
Sure, I'm happy to answer that question. So the Great Western Marketplace building is to the north of this parking lot. That previously was the Super K and Great Western Marketplace, and this parking served that commercial use. With the conversion of that building to the storage facility, it did leave this parcel for future development. We did receive a site plan review that was approved for the development of a multifamily project at this site. And so this project will be directly adjacent to that approved multifamily project.
We'll be over 300 feet to the Great Western Marketplace.
Oh, also, this property is owned community commercial. It's not residential itself.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Any discussion items? Anyone prepared to make a motion? Commissioner Marshall?
In the matter of LDC 18-00075, based upon compliance with applicable findings, I move to approve the tentative map and special use permit, subject to the conditions 1 through 24.
Okay, thank you. Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second, Commissioner Weisky.
Okay, have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? It's quick, wasn't he? Oh, I know. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, motion carries. Move on to item 7.4, which is case number LDC 18-00080, Crosswalk Daycare. And I believe that the applicant's representative is here for a presentation.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. For the record, Angela Foos with Loomis and Associates here tonight on behalf of the applicant Outlook Church. The request before you this evening is a special use permit for residential adjacency. The site in front of us is the existing shopping center that's been around since the 1980s. It's located on the corner of North McCarran and Kings Row. For those of you that probably went to UNR, you know Chewy and Jugs is in here. There's a Blind Onion. The property in question is now Outlook Church. Previously, this was the State of Nevada Welfare Office, but Outlook Church took over as the tenant of the space a couple years ago. So more recently, they have been working with some of the nonprofit groups in the community and asking what can they do as a faith-based community organization to help with some of these affordable housing issues. So one of the things that came up was a partnership with the what's the name of it? I just totally blanked out. Thank you, Children's Cabinet. To partner with the Children's Cabinet to look at daycare facility. So because the church occupies the space and it's actually way more square footage than they need, they have this additional square footage. So what they're asking to do is put in a childcare center as part of this project. That is a permitted use. That does not trigger any kind of special use permit or variance. But one of the requirements per the city zoning code, when you have child daycare, you also have to have an outdoor space. So we're adding an outdoor space, which is adjacent to residentially zoned property. So that's what is before you tonight as part of the special use permit. Again, this site is zoned arterial commercial. It's been an existing shopping center for quite some time. Those homes to the west are all zoned SF6. They've been there for equally quite some time as well. Here is some site photos. So the front of the building is that top left one. That's what you look at when you go into the shopping center. And then on that top right is the back area. So right now, this space is used for parking and trash enclosures. Nobody really parks back here because there's all the parking in front. So the trash enclosures are there. As part of this, those trash enclosures will go away and they will be moved to the alleyway, which is the bottom right picture. All of the other tenants that utilize this building also have trash enclosures in that alleyway, so that's consistent with how everything else is used. Waste management is used to going down that alley to pick up trash. And then that bottom left corner is what you see when you're standing at the point of where we're putting this new outdoor space. It's a wall, it's a masonry wall, and it's about 13 feet tall. Above that wall then is a fence. And so behind that fence is where the single family homes are located. Here's a site plan to show you where we're planning to make improvements. As you can see on that bottom left-hand side, the area in blue is going to be a platform. So platform will go, so it will be equal with that back door. It will be fenced off so that nobody can get in or out. And then we do have to add additional landscaping. So again, in that very bottom corner, proposed landscaping is where we're proposing to add new landscaping. This shopping center, because it was built so long ago, does not meet today's landscape code. The current code requires about 15% site landscaping, and it's currently developed with about 5% site landscaping. So as part of the special use permit, we are being conditioned to add landscaping, and it's based on proportionate to the increase in use or square footage. So that equates to that bottom corner, and the idea would be to try and screen from McCarran as much as possible so that location made sense. We also made sure that you still had adequate fire access around that building, and again, that waste management can get through that portion of the building. Here is a rendering to give you a better idea of what that outdoor space is going to look like. And the intent is not to create a playground, so to speak. The intent is really to have an outdoor area that could be used for the kids if they're doing art projects, if they need to get out and have a place to just kind of run wild. But it's not meant to be a place with slides and a lot of play structures. So again, we have the area fenced off for police protection. They preferred to have it to be an open view fence so they can see what's going on the other side of the fence. So we've complied with that requirement. And it actually ties in nicely. So you saw the picture of what it looks like now, and this is the after effect. So it actually makes that whole corner look a lot better. And I think anything viewed from North McCarran is going to be a positive improvement rather than what you see now, which is just the trash enclosures and parking that doesn't get used. And that concludes my presentation. I'm available if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. At this point, we'll turn it over to Brooke for presentation from staff.
Good evening, Commissioners, Chair Gower. Brooke Oswald, Associate Planner for the record. The applicant's representative did a very thorough job in kind of going over this project. I'd like to hit a few other key points. As shown here, we're looking at our reimagined Reno master plan and looking at the zoning on that. This is zoned suburban mixed use. One of the things we're looking in that suburban mixed use is a good mix of residential and commercial uses. We see a daycare as being very supportive of that overall master plan use. Once again, looking at the zoning, when we looked at this, we looked at looking at the residential adjacency and those that would be impacted most. We looked at these two properties here. Let's see, right here, and we will be requiring, as she showed, that fencing and screening. We'll be requiring that is new screening. That fencing probably is about 30 years old or older from the original development. It's wood. It's been cracked. It's falling apart. So that will be rescreened as part of this, offering a little bit more visual protection to that residence. The residents to the south of the project here, we do have 5 lanes of traffic. There's 4 lanes and then a turn lane there. A fair amount of noise and generated from that. We see the impact of this daycare running from the hours of 8 to 5 in the outdoor thing being minimal impact on that. We did look at light and some of those things. So there will be requirements on the light that it's LED, that it's shielded from those adjacent residents. And then the other thing we're looking at lighting is that it provides that safety in that area at nighttime. So that can be patrolled by police. And as was mentioned, the clear view fencing so that it's easily visible only from police, but also from the public there to create that safety. The additional landscaping that was mentioned that goes in the corner will also help to protect those and provide a little nicer view for those residents across the street there. Just to visually look at that from the aerial of looking how the lots are lot, it is the backyard of the fences along McCarran there too, having even less impact on those. Once again, these are the existing conditions. Just want to mention again, you can see the wall, a 13-foot wall height there, solid wall. There's additional 30 feet probably till the back of the house and another 30 feet of elevation that happens there. The dumpsters will be located down this alley. Per our code, we usually require that those be enclosed as those would move. Staff felt that in this situation it wasn't appropriate. We do have a fair amount of screening both sides of that. The predominant, every other tenant there does not have an enclosure, and we also worried about when we started enclosures, the accessibility of those enclosures and also the drainage that might be impacted down that alleyway because of those. And as you can see from this is just details that elevation change that you have happening there and that buffering that's happening not only from that elevation change, but from that solid wall, and then the additional visual screening that will happen through the fencing there. Big concerns that city staff had was to make sure that we have that accessibility for fire. They need a 30 or 40-foot turn radius there. That enables us to really push that landscaping in. And as was discussed, we will be requiring landscaping per code. We're losing about 200 feet of landscaping. They'll be required to replace that. And then per our code, they're going to be required about another 800 square feet of landscaping. So that will be about 1,000 square feet of landscaping in that corner, providing additional buffering. The landscape associated with that will be per code for that area that's provided there. Staff thinks is great is that we're actually increasing the landscaping on this site, as was stated, is 5%. We're looking to increase that a little bit, and it's proportional to their development on the outside. This is just showing the previous landscaping and sort of how deficient that it is. Was built in the 80s and to the standards of that time. That concludes my presentation. If you do have any questions, I am available.
Okay, thanks very much. I am going to ask the commissioners for disclosures on this item. Commissioner Olivas.
Commissioner Olivas, I visited the site and I spoke with the applicant's representative.
Commissioner Marshall, no disclosures.
Commissioner Johnson, I spoke with the applicant's representative and visited the site.
Commissioner Gower, familiar with the site?
Commissioner Griffith, I spoke with the applicant's representative, and I am very familiar with the site as I lived on Bryan Street for a number of years.
Commissioner Hawkins, as do I, but I don't live on the same street.
Commissioner Weisky, I had an email from the applicant's representative, and even though I didn't attend UNR, I'm familiar with the site.
Thank you very much. I do not have any requests to speak forms on this item. Michelle, do you have any?
No, I do not.
Okay, anyone wishing to make a public comment on this item? All right, seeing none, we'll close that portion of the item, bring it back to the commission for questions. Commissioner Weisky.
Thank you. Brooke, if you would, please. Condition number 10.
Yes.
Can you tell
So
me
there-
what
there was an
condition
amendment
number
that
10
should
is
have been-
supposed to be?
Yes, there was an amendment that should have been distributed. In that is no signage will be allowed in that area or within that area.
Okay, no signage shall be allowed in that area.
Correct.
Okay, if it was emailed out this afternoon, I didn't have email access, so I didn't see it.
Okay, certainly, and if you have questions, we had two other amendments on
Did-
that too.
Amendment, condition number 4 and number 5, then,
We can put the memo up.
And
The memo was emailed out yesterday,
Okay.
so if we can.
I
put
have
that-
one right here.
If we can put on the overhead, just for everybody's
Mr. Chairman, I
reference.
have no further questions. Thank you. I have a
Okay.
copy of the amendment.
Thank you. Any other questions? Commissioner Marshall?
Angela, can my biggest concern is locating children right next to McCarran. Is there any state regulations or other regulations regarding location of daycare next to major arterials regarding air quality concerns?
Nothing on that issue, just based on our conversations with the social services programs that license daycares. They don't have any issues with this site. Per the zoning code, one thing that came up is we were limited on where we could put this outdoor space. You can't have it where the drop-off area is. There's screening involved. So this kind of, I would say, blocked us into having it be this location, which was actually fine because there was room back there to have it. We are going to make sure that that gated area is locked and that there's going to be a system in place so that kids don't have any ability to get out and nobody has the ability to get in without all the proper, adult supervision that can handle that.
Yeah, I was more concerned about air quality than, what generally is
With
the use
exhaust from
that
the
they're gonna,
cars.
yeah. And, diesel particulates from big trucks that are going along there. What's the exposure of the kids to outside? How is it, I'm sorry, you kind of said it wasn't exactly a playground area, but what's the intended use?
Well, again, per zoning code, we have to have an outdoor area. It's not sized to be a big playground with play structures. So this is one of those areas where kids can go if they're doing artwork, to get outside to just kind of play. But it's not an area where you're going to spend hours at a time outside. They are limited from 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. And again, as part of the daycare, the age of this group is infant to 5-year-olds. So a lot of their day will be structured with indoor playtime and specific activities, and then they'll have structured outdoor time as part of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Discussion? Commissioner Hawkins?
Question for Brooke. Could you bring up the landscaping plan, please? You see that bottom corner there that makes like a little triangle?
Correct, yes.
Is that a necessary thing that it has to go there? Because I looked at the whole site, and they'll end up digging up a lot of asphalt in order to run lines over there just to water
Yeah, we did consider that, and there is a cost associated with that. Two things. One thing in our code with that applicability is that comes back, or that proportionality of them doing that. It is recommended that that is located along the arterial. We also saw the appropriateness of that landscape being directly related to the project and the impact of that project, and not the whole development as a whole. And then also the additional buffering and screening that it gave to the alleyway, and then probably to also buffer the playground itself from McCarran.
Okay.
Thank you. Discussion? If there's no discussion, I'd entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Johnson, I will make a motion in the case of LDC 18-00080 crosswalk daycare. Based upon compliance with the applicable findings, I move to approve the special use permit, subject to the conditions, including the 3 revised conditions, 4, 5, and 10, that were provided to us. With those conditions, I can make all of the findings for the special use permit.
Okay, great, thank you. Have a motion, do I have a second? Commissioner Olivas?
Commissioner Olivas, I'll second, and I can make all the findings.
Okay, motion and a second, any discussion? All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Hey, thank you. Anyone opposed? All right, you guys are in front of me tonight. All right. Moving on then to item 7.5, case number LDC 18-00051 Vista Enclave. Give Angela a minute to change projects here, come back up.
Well, good evening. For the record, Angela Foose with Loomis and Associates here tonight representing the applicant. The project before you tonight is a request for a special use permit for 3 triggers and then a tentative map for 130 lots. This tentative map includes cluster development. It also includes a special use permit for grading with fills greater than 10 feet, and because we have a major drainage way that we will be disturbing. The property is located very similar in location to the site that you just looked at earlier tonight. This is a 30-acre site on the north side of Vista Parkway. To the south is the Lakes at Vista Apartments that came before this group probably a year or 2 ago. The Silver Dollar project would be to the left on the map in front of you. The property to the north is BLM. The North Valleys Regional Park actually, so Washoe County actually has a lease agreement with the BLM, so they use that property as part of the North Valleys Park. There's a trail system in that. And then on the right side is private land that is part of the Vista Hills development. That's a PUD that's already approved. Here's a couple of photos to show you what the site looks like. Again, it's undeveloped and surrounded pretty much by undeveloped land. The property is zoned SF6, so with that zoning, we have the potential to have 222 lots. Because of some of the site constraints, we have a much reduced site layout of only 130 lots. So with this, we're at 4.23 dwelling units per acre. And here is our site plan. We are utilizing cluster development. Our lots are going to range in size from about 4,500 square feet up to about 15,000 square feet. We have 2 major drainage ways across the site, and you can see that they're the areas pretty much in the green. So on the very top side, and that's, I apologize, our north arrow is actually to the left, so it's kind of awkward. So I'm just going to talk in terms of up and down rather than north and east. But on the top of that development, we have that common open space area. That accounts for about 10 acres. So this entire project is 30 acres. It's about 1/3 of the site is going to be set aside as common open space. And again, a big part of that is because we have this major drainage way, which then really limits the ability to use what's on the other side of the major drainage way. Other than that, we have 2 points of access. Again, off Sky Vista, this will be full turning movements. So you can turn right and left from these 2 entrances. The Sky Vista Parkway, so right now, that parkway is developed with 2 lanes. And as part of this development, we are going to be looking at doing some work on Sky Vista on our side of the property. So we're going to have to put in about a 30-foot wide landscape buffer from the homes. Beyond that, we're going to have landscaping, we're gonna have sidewalks, we're gonna have a bike lane, and we're gonna have parkway strips. So there's a lot of trees shown on the Sky Vista Parkway. We also trigger a special use permit for cuts and fills. I'm sorry, actually just fills. The maximum per code is 10 feet, and we're going up to about 19 feet as part of the fills. I circled there on the map the two areas in question. Stormwater, there's been a lot of discussion with this commission on stormwater and how it's going to be detained or retained. So because we have that 10 acres of open space and we have a major drainage way that runs through the property, we're able to use that major drainage way and actually modify it to provide for more retention. So we do have that 2-to-1 ratio, meaning that everything that leaves stormwater-wise that leaves the site now, we basically have to double that and retain it on site. So with that, we do have a retention basin that's over 7 acre-feet in size, so it's a substantial retention basin and definitely will impact development or stormwater that runs off into Swan Lake down the stream. In terms of traffic, Sky Vista Parkway is planned for improvements as part of the RTP sometime in the timeframe of 2022 to 2026. So until RTC decides to widen it, the development that's coming forth is being asked to put in basically a middle turn lane. Because we are right across the street from that apartment project, one of the conditions as part of that project was that they had to put in a middle turn lane. So if for some reason that project doesn't move forward, then this project is conditioned to do that. And it's just the length of their parcel. It doesn't go beyond their parcel or prior to their parcel. It's basically just a turn lane that you can get into the property safely. Again, with that, we're also required to put in the parkway strips, the landscaped parkway strips and the sidewalks and the bike lanes. All of that will be torn out once RTC comes forward with a plan for how they're going to widen that road. We do have adequate right-of-way so that they're covered and that there's no issues with having to buy property or take out homes. We have plenty of land for them to be able to widen Sky Vista Parkway. As part of our open space plan, we do have a pretty extensive trail system, and we're trying to tie into all properties around the parcel itself. So we reached out to Washoe County. Luckily, when we were going through this design, they were right in the process of putting in some trails on that BLM land. So we told them this is where we are planning to tie in. So they actually stubbed out a trail so that we can just tie directly into them. So that's great. So we automatically have this, North Valley's trail system that we will tie into. And then as far as the properties on the east side, which is again to the right area, we will tie into private property. So depending on how that property is developed, we'll be able to hopefully one day connect to a trail system that continues through their property. And that concludes my presentation. I'm available if you have any questions.
Okay, thanks, Angela. Turn it over to Heather for a presentation from staff.
Thank you. Good evening. Again, Heather Manzo, Assistant Planner for the record. The applicant has illustrated the nature of the request before you this evening with regard to this tentative map request. I did want to note that in the recommended conditions of approval for this project, both conditions number 11 and conditions number 13 address both the sewer infrastructure as well as the sewer treatment plant ability to serve this project. And I would recommend that, to be consistent with the previously approved project before you this evening, just down the street, that a condition of approval be added to state that prior to the issuance of a mass grading permit, the applicant shall obtain a sewer will serve letter. So I would recommend that the Planning Commission consider adding that with this request if it's approved this evening. This is a request for a cluster development, and as the applicant noted, the requested density is well below the density that would be allowed within the SF6 zone. 4.23 dwelling units per acre is what's proposed, and 7.26 dwelling units per acre is what's allowed within the SF6 zoning district. In addition to that, the applicant has provided a minimum lot size of approximately 4,496 square feet, but the average lot size within the development is about 5,200 square feet. During the Reimagine Reno public outreach process, questions were introduced to the public regarding what amenities were really within the public's interest as something is very important. And with that, access to open space and amenities that are related to open space were really, they came up to the forefront of folks' minds when they were responding to this request. And so with that, the applicant has added in a trail system that will provide that access to the regional trail network that's within this area and ties into the regional park site. And there is a condition of approval that's recommended with this request that that trail system map that you were presented in your packet and before you this evening also included an additional tie-in to the project lots on the eastern portion. With that, the applicant has provided approximately 30% of the site area in common open space. That's going to, it's conditioned to be maintained by the developer or the association that's established with this development. And that does add for a deed restriction requirement that that open space be provided in perpetuity. With that, the Neighborhood Advisory Board did provide some comments that were related to traffic and pedestrian safety, and hopefully those items were addressed adequately in the staff report that's before you this evening. Staff is recommending approval of the project, and I did receive 2 comments from citizens that were related specifically to drainage. I think it may have been their impression that the drainage way was going to be completely filled. In this scenario, as included in the exhibits in your staff report, while the applicant is disturbing the drainage way that is on the property, they are still maintaining that flow. In addition to that, they are providing additional detention facilities within the project site. That concludes my presentation. Staff is recommending approval of the request, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask the commission for disclosures. Commissioner Weisky.
I'm familiar with the site, and I received an email from the applicant's representative.
Commissioner Hawkins spoke with the applicant's representative, visited the site, and email.
Commissioner Griffith, for the record, I spoke with the applicant's representative. I received an email regarding the drainage that Heather did mention, and I am familiar with the site.
Commissioner Gower, familiar with the site and received the email?
Commissioner Johnson, familiar with the site, spoke with the applicant's representative, and received an email.
Commissioner Marshall, no disclosures.
Commissioner Levis, I visited the site, I received email, and I spoke with the applicant's representative.
Okay, thank you. Do not have any requests to speak forms on this item. Michelle, do you have any?
No, I do not.
Okay, thank you. Any comments on this item? Yep, please. Please state your name when you get up there and then fill out a request to speak form after,
Good evening.
please.
My name is Steve Pugwerjack. I live in the area, 10100 Trail Drive. And in looking at that area on Sky Vista, I know it has growing pains. We also have growing pains for jobs. And a wholesome community right there next to the park, to me, seems like good planning, good place for kids to grow up. There's the place to hike. There's that beautiful park that's been put in there. I just think it's a good environment for wholesome family living, and I just like to say it's a good project. Thank you.
Great, thank you. If you could fill out a
Sir, can you
request to
fill out a
speak
card,
form with
please?
Michelle, we'd appreciate that. Any other comments on this item? Okay, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission for questions. And Commissioner Hawkins, question?
I just want to go off what this gentleman just said. They're finishing up the regional park, putting in 2 new flat fields, the women's softball, not a stadium, but I guess where they do baseball diamond, as well as the Babe Ruth should be just about ready to go. So this would be an excellent project to put right next to the park.
Excellent. Any other discussion on the item?
Mr. Chairman, real quick, if I may, Janelle or Shawnee, can you tell me the disturbance to the the drainage, natural drainage that we have?
Shawnee Dunnigan, Associate Civil Engineer for the record. So what they are proposing to do is kind of modify the existing drainage way to accommodate for retention basins. It will accommodate their additional flow from their impervious surfaces for that 100-year 10-day event, and then detention for the 100-year 24-hour event on top of that. So in doing that, though, it provides an overall benefit to the drainage system, because in those smaller events, it's providing retention for what that just drainage facility is receiving, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. The reason I ask that is because we'd like to stay out of drainage ways with development, but in this case, you see it as a benefit because it's going to retain and take care of 100-year plus events.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Other questions, discussion, motion? Commissioner Hawkins.
One more question for Shawnee. We looked at a metering type retention pond on an earlier development this evening. Is there something like that that will be included in with this project?
I'm not so familiar with the previous project, but I believe
Silver Dollar.
Yes, the 2 retention ponds being proposed here do meter that water back. So
Okay.
they have weir structures up top to meter that flow.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, you ready for a motion?
Sure am.
I'll make a comment
Commissioner
first.
Weisky.
Yeah. I guess we didn't touch on some of the other issues that I think everybody had in their mind, and probably don't want to rehash and start that up. But I guess one thing I will reiterate on that is that the reason I can make some of the findings is the or will be adequate services and the progress we've made towards that. And we need that to continue. So I have faith and confidence, but that needs to keep the momentum.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Weisky.
Thank you. In the case of LDC 18-00051 Vista Enclave, based upon compliance with the applicable findings, I move to approve the tentative map and special use permit subject to conditions, including the additional condition as previously read into by Heather regarding a will serve letter for sewer before the mass grading permit can be issued, which is on the screen now, and I'm sure I hear Michelle telling me in the background she's already taken 2 pictures of it, but I'm not paying attention to her.
Doing a good job of it, too. All right.
And I will say that the response I got from Shawnee regarding the drainage way improvements and the retention for the major 100-year events plus is what changed my mind to this, because that's what's important, I think, in future developments in the area for stormwater. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion. Do I have a second? Commissioner Levis.
Commissioner Levis, I'll make the second, and I can make the findings.
Okay. I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Commissioner Marshall? Motion carries 6-1. And we will move out of our public hearing items and into item number 8, Truckee Meadows Regional Planning Liaison Report. Commissioner Hawkins.
The report took almost 2 hours on Stonegate last night. It was a 6-3 vote. It was approved, so it will go forward. And we have a workshop next Wednesday, 6 to 8 p.m. at the RTC Center down there on Terminal Way.
Thank you very much. Item number 9, staff announcements.
Thank you, Claudia Hanson, Planning Manager. We had City Council last night, or yesterday and last night. The amendments to Ranchera PUD were approved through first reading. The Echo Avenue Master Plan and zoning map amendments were approved. Recreational marijuana ordinance was adopted for the Title 18 changes. It was a big agenda. And then last night, later than this, 14 on Cashel was remanded back here, so you'll be seeing that again. The applicant has made revisions that will lower the height of the buildings, which was an issue that was discussed here, as well as from the neighbors who had concerns on that. So we're going to meet with the appellants and the applicant and hopefully come up with a design that everybody is satisfied with. I won't say happy, but everyone is satisfied with. So you'll be seeing that soon. And Meridian 120 was remanded back to the Planning Commission. So they are looking for a more holistic view of development in that area to address specifically fire services and TUMWA services, and to look at the area on a whole, not just this area, but how those services and other utilities are provided within that entire Mortensen-Garson South area. So look forward to that one.
Okay,
all I
looking
have.
forward to that.
I bet you are.
All right, Commissioner suggestions for future agenda items.
Commissioner
Commissioner
Olivas. Yeah, I guess as far as when something remanded back and looking more in total, when we got a specific map before us and certain findings, what's the balance and how can we get some insight on how to go about that?
Sure, we'll provide that at the appropriate time. We'll do. We'll work closely with the attorney's office on that one too.
I'd like an update on where we're going for getting the commission to look at abandonments as well as annexation, yeah. Thank you.
And we are looking at that with the Title 18 revisions to procedures.
Okay,
So that is
thanks.
something that's being considered on there.
Okay, great. Item number 11, public comment. This item is for either public comment on any action item or for any general public comment. Anyone wishing to make a comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn. How about it?